We're here today with James Biggs. James is an amazing individual. James has been on this earth for 105 years. He's a member of the Masonic fraternity. He's been a Mason more than 80 years, more than most of us have been on the face of this earth. So we want to try to get a little bit of information from you, Brother Biggs. First of all, I know you were a school teacher, interested in education. Could you tell us a little bit about your early years in education?
Well, the first year I was out teaching in a regular high school was Pearsall, Texas, 1922, I think. And that year I got to watch some administrators, our superintendent, and others, and they all went to math because it was easier to grade and get out. The Teachers College had a placement bureau. When you finished the 11th grade, you were given a teacher's certificate, good for 6 years. And I got that. And my dad was pushed at home with 5 children, two girls and 3 boys. And so I was the oldest. So I put my name in the Teacher Placement Bureau, and they got a call from Marathon, Texas, which is just a whistle stop on the Southern Pacific east of Alpine. And I've had a year there, had a scout troop, and most everywhere I went, I could get a scout troop, revive one, or start originally was one. And I enjoyed it. We'd go out on Friday evenings, cook out, play all night, and work.
Well, Brother Biggs, I've known you for more than 50 years, and when I knew you in my early years, you were a chemistry teacher. What interested you in science? Tell me a little bit about how you got into teaching chemistry.
When I went back in the summertime, there were some World War I men in the Teachers College taking chemistry, and they seemed to be being challenged, and so I fell in with them and started taking every semester. I'd take a chemistry course and a math course, even surveying, in order to get one in the summertime. I'd take that. And so in 1922, I finished a year at Marathon and had a big time. And a lady in the parent teacher, and she says, "How old are you?" Because they thought that I was younger than what they could be. And I said, "Well, how old do you think I am?" And she said, "About 27. I was 18. And we were going to put on a play. Teachers taking parts. We cleaned up a opera house, old one, what one little town could afford. We were sweeping it out, clean. And I had taken up a knife from a boy who was carving on the desk, and we were told to do that, take them up. They soon learned not to get the knives out and cut on the test. And the boy, unfortunately, had his daddy's knife. And a rancher, you take away his knife, he's helpless. He can't castrate them, and he can't do a whole lot of things. And so he came up there, Mr. I think I was going to give you the name. Anyhow, he came up to the stage where I was sweeping, and he said, I want to get the knife that you took up from my boy. And I said, well, I can't do that. Well, you're told to take them up, and the superintendent would have to tell to take them up. And he said, well, set your props. And about that time, the superintendent walked in the door, way at the end of the hall. And he said, Mr. McKinney, I want to see you. Mr. McKinney went down there where he was, and they sat and hoorah'd and had a good time while we were cleaning up. And the superintendent told him, he says, you don't want to fool with that man because he's a minor. I wasn't 21 yet. So, and so I gave the boy back his knife after it got to be a big bone of contention.
Brother Biggs, when you were about 8 or 9 years old, the Civil War was just about 30 or 40 years behind you. Can you tell me a little bit about the feelings and emotions and environment around your life at that time?
My grandfather's front porch swing, I quizzed him, tried to get him to tell me about an encounter that he had had. He wouldn't talk. It seems to be true. Even in World War II, they don't want to talk about it. He was a captain in the P.C. Woods Brigade from San Marcos in the Civil War, and he saw action. And he had a good horse, his own horse that he took in. And a Yankee started chasing him, and he got out of it. He got his horse over the creek. He could jump the creek. He taught his horse to jump, and the Yank didn't. He stayed on the other side of the creek. He didn't follow. But that was up in Oklahoma, I think, in Missouri. It was up in that area where the North was trying to come down and split the South, Western and Eastern.
And Brother Biggs, do you remember the first time you saw an automobile?
The first car in San Marcos was the banker had the money, and he had a putt-putt car. I think it was probably 4-cylinder, and you could hear it two blocks away. And I was a kid then, about 10 years old, I guess. And I'd walk down from my grandfather's house where we lived, 4 streets down to where this banker came going home from downtown San Marcos. And there's always a little group down there because it's a curio it didn't go but about 10 miles an hour at top speed.
Do you remember what year model that car was? What year?
It was about 1906, I think.
Was it a Ford?
No, I don't know what it was. It didn't survive as a leading, like a Buick or a Chevrolet.
Do you remember the first car that you drove?
Yeah, the man owned the car, and he's going to let me hold the steering wheel for a little bit. And it was quite a thrill to pilot that thing around. But I didn't go fast. I didn't put any stunts. I didn't have to have a driver's license.
And Brother Biggs, could you tell me your memories about World War I? Any interesting stories you'd like to tell? Anything you remember about that war?
You bet.
Well, tell me about World War I.
Our troop, Boy Scouts in San Marcos, were invited over to Loyalty Day Parade in New Braunfels. Those Dutchmen over there, it's an old settlement, way back early days, German settlers came there, and Fredericksburg and Mason. They had a series of towns that they were boss. Even the Indians left them alone. Well, I was 12 years old in about 12 years. It had to be 12 years old to be a Boy Scout. And as soon as I was 12 years old, I got in a troop there at home. We met in the auditorium, second story, the fire town had a pretty good fire department. And they let the scouts meet in the second story up there. It wouldn't interfere with the workings of the fire department. And we went on hikes. And they sent us a letter. The scoutmaster got a letter, said they're over in Europe, they're having wooden propellers on planes, and anytime they hit, they shatter. And we're going to have to get walnut what doesn't shatter so bad. And so we made a survey on a big map of the Blanco River. The troop got out in the river bottom, and as far as we could see any walnut trees, well, we would put them on the map, marked. And then they'd play all night. I don't know how they did it, but they'd walk all day and play all night.
As a youngster, growing up in the San Marcos area, what did you do for entertainment? What did youngsters do those days?
Scouting. And then we had teams, baseball teams.
Did you play any sports?
Huh?
Did you play any sports?
I was catcher on an amateur team.
Were you good?
Huh?
Were you a good catcher?
They didn't pass me.
Good. And then, Brother Biggs, there was the Great Depression that came along, and how did that impact you and your family?
I was teaching school at Taft, Texas, principal of high school, down there in 1930, and the Depression came on, and the bank said we're going to close temporarily, but it'll open. We think it'll open inside of 2 weeks. And so we were caught without any cash and no place to get it for a week. But they came back on ahead of what they thought they could do. And
did your family?
The school board was having their source of money to pay us reduced, so they had to reduce us 15% and issue one check that was cash, you could cash it, and another check that was interest bearing, and we'd put it away and save it for later. I saved a bunch of those, and in 1935, I went into Corpus and bought some furniture, which we had neglected to do up to that time. And then I moved from clear across Texas, from the Gulf Coast to the Yates Oil Pool, which is just below McCamey and east of Fort Stockton, and I spent 3 years out there, and at Christmas time I didn't have any money to go splurge during the Christmas holidays, and so I used this school lathe and turned out 32 pieces of wood to candlestick holders and electric lamp stands. I got the best one on my table now in my apartment. It's Spanish walnut, and that's pretty grain, very pretty grain, and close grain. And it'll take a polish, and it shines.
So you did a lot of woodworking.
Huh?
You did a lot of woodwork?
Yeah. And occasionally they'd have a paying job. This guy he was a hunter, and he killed deer, and he wanted a table in his kitchen that he could take a deer apart. And so he wanted me to put a band about that 5-inch around the top of the legs to keep them from smashing that. And he paid me for doing that.
Do you remember Pearl Harbor?
It was a Sunday morning, and it was early, about 8 o'clock, that it came on the television. And I listened to it, and then I went up to the school building, and my superintendent, a lot of times would go up on Sundays, and he'd quiet, and nobody around to disturb him, and he could do his work on a Sunday morning. And I met him in the hall, going to his office, and he said, "Did I hear the news?" And I told him, "Yes, I did." And he says, "Well, I don't think there'll be war." I said, "I don't think you're right, but you're right to think that." And before the war was over, his boy was in the Navy and had to do what they said.
When you heard about Pearl Harbor, did that make you want to go join the Army? Go join the Navy?
I can't say that it was a deciding factor, no.
Well, what made you want to go join the military?
Well, I thought it was Boy Scout work, and I've done a lot of it. I will do my duty to God and my country and obey the Scout laws. And if I'm going to get up here in front of a bunch of boys, and I've said that, then I better go.
Okay.
Or they won't believe I mean what I say.
And now, Brother Biggs, if you don't mind, I'd like to focus a little bit on your Masonic history. You know, it's been 80 years of Masonic life for you. Tell me, what first enticed you to join the Masonic Lodge?
Dad, in 1912, he joined. And I guess it was about after the war when things simmered down a little, he was 1912 and I was about 1918. In the meantime, I was a demolay. My two brothers, all three of us, went into a Knights Templar in their meeting there in the bank building in San Marcos. Knew about the demolay started in Missouri, and they wanted to start, and by George, they almost got Missouri didn't get much ahead of them. They established a demolay. And I was going to go to my first teaching job when September came along. And so I had to drop everything in San Marcos and get on out there to Marathon.
Yeah. Well, tell me, what was it like joining the lodge back 80 years ago? Did you remember filling out the petition, and how you remember the process of what it was like to join the lodge?
Dad said the evening that I was going to go down to be initiated, he said, "Be sure you got clean underwear." That's all he said. But that told me a lot. And when the master said about writing, I didn't remember that I had said I wouldn't write. So I scribbled a little bit, and the master, indignant. I could have told him, but I didn't want to make things worse. I could have told him that I could write all day long and not write anything I wasn't supposed to write. And I stayed in it, and my grandfather, the preacher, was in that lodge too. He'd move his membership, though, where he'd go, and then move it back to San Marcos. San Marcos was his home port.
Do you belong to any other Masonic organizations? Did you ever join the Scottish Rite? Well, you are Scottish Rite.
Yeah.
And you recently had something happen to you in Houston, right?
KCCH.
You got your KCCH in Houston.
And when I sent in the first things to the office, they sent back a little pin that said endowed membership. I do have endowed membership, but I didn't know that they cared a hoot about that.
Yeah. Did you ever join any other Masonic organizations? York Rite, Shrine?
Yeah. I didn't take an office, but I was a Knight Templar, and for a long time when I was in Houston, I attended the thing.
Brother Biggs, you've seen a lot of Grand Masters in the state of Texas. Could you tell me who was your most memorable past Grand Master?
Leonard P. Harvey. I wish he'd perform my obituary. He does a beautiful job of that. I've seen him 2 or 3 times when he gave the Masonic burial by memory. He served two terms of one. No, none of them served 2 terms. Okay.
Let's go back to the work, the Masonic work as we know it. You know, today we have monitors, books that we use in the lodge, but the work is still memory work. You told me earlier that it was the same back then as it was now.
Before Lightfoot.
Before when there was the Lightfoot's manual, before we had the monitor.
Ask me a question.
All right, what do you remember about the monitor, Lightfoot's manual of the lodge? How you learned the Masonic stuff, other than the memory
Just
work?
deadpan and repetition. And it has to be kept up or you lose it. I've already lost most of it.
Do you remember much about the standardization of the work? Was the work, when you first learned it, exactly the same as we do it today?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I got it from you first. Okay. Go ahead, Joe.
Now, Right Worshipful Tom is in a position to judge. I think he's been to hundreds of learning sessions, and
Yes, right, Worshipful Tommy Griffin, most Worshipful Tommy Griffin, was on the Committee on Work. Yeah, he spent 13 years on the committee.
he had the Houston area to Beaumont, the Gulf Coast area, and he came to Houston pretty regularly. And that's the same kind of thing that makes a scout troop. If the sponsoring committee will meet regularly and give the boys a chance to report their what they've done in a merit badge, and if they have to wait for till the grown-ups feel like it's about time, or they finally wake up, but that's what holds the troop back. Is a sponsoring committee don't just have regular advance.
You were master at S.P. Walter Lodge in Houston, weren't you?
Huh?
Weren't you master at S.P. Walter Lodge in Houston?
Yeah.
You were master, right?
Yeah, in '76.
What, do you remember anything about those years?
About what?
But the year you were master at S.P. Walter.
It was just 1 year.
Yeah, but do you remember anything about that? Anything you could relate to us? Any interesting things happened to you?
Well, we had to have scrub days to get the walls and cleaned up in that lodge. Did that a time or two.
Brother Biggs, what trends have you noticed in Masonry over your 80 years?
I don't think they ought to examine 6 or 7 men in their esoteric work by having this one answer a question and then ask a question and so on. That's been done several times when I was present, and I don't think that's the way to do it.
How do you think it should be done?
Individual.
And I understand that you've got a certificate in the proficiency work.
Yeah. Well, I don't know whether this... they issued me a card after 25 years of going to, once a year, going to study group, and it was over at Hillcrest Lodge, not Hillcrest, Reagan Lodge in Houston. It was held over there. We had and Tommy, Right Worshipful, Tommy was in charge of those things, and he had them pretty regularly. And I think regularity enables a person to advance a little faster.
Brother Biggs, on another topic, during your 105 years, you've seen a lot of presidents of the United States. Do you have a favorite president you'd like to talk about?
FDR.
Tell us about FDR.
Well, he ran during the Depression and was elected in 32, I think it was, and he went 4 years or 8 years. He went late in his first term would end about 1940, and then he elected a second time, and lasted until about 1945 or 6, I guess, and then Truman Nichols. He's a Mason, and he got to be most worshipful Grand Lodge of Kansas.
Missouri, I believe he was the Grand Master, most worshipful Grand Master in Missouri.
Huh?
Missouri, I believe, is the state.
Huh?
Or Harry Truman was the most worshipful Grand Master in Missouri, I believe.
I don't know.
I think. Anyway. Well, what other things do you remember about FDR?
Well, he was a good thinker, and he got himself out of a lot of trouble by his response. He didn't do masonry much. I don't remember anything he did that benefited.
Okay, who was your least favorite president?
Huh?
Who was your least favorite president? The one you did not like?
Herbert Hoover.
Why?
Overgrown. I just didn't like him.
Brother Biggs, can you tell us a little bit about the development of technology during your 105 years? What do you remember most about technology developments?
I took automobile mechanics, and what it amounted to, it was a physics course. And what it amounted to was, in the fall semester, the gas engine. The winter semester, automobile electricity, the starters and lights and all the different things that have to be taken care of. So then they would bring a car in that needed attention, and we could get them back in order there in that college lab. So I felt competent to get a car.
Good.
And
do you remember your first girlfriend? I promise not to tell Pat about this.
not the one I married.
Okay. Do you remember your first girlfriend?
She came up here from the Gulf Coast to San Marcos, summer school. And I met her there, and we went on a party or two down by the river. And then her family moved to Colorado Springs. And that kind of put a quietus on it. We did a lot of rally riding back and forth. And I built a fumed oak lady's desk, secretarial desk, not very big. And she accepted it and put it in their home in Colorado Springs. And I went up to Colorado Springs in the summer of 1924, which is the year that I should have graduated, but I didn't. I had to come back the summertime to finish up one or two English courses, and something that I just couldn't schedule or had left over from all the stuff.
What were some of your first thoughts on air travel? When did you see your first airplane? Could you tell us something about that?
Yeah, we had seen in the paper that the man was coming from East Coast. He was going to California, and he was going a little at a time. And he was due to come to San Marcos. And I went down. My mother was in the carriage, and she took the family, kids, down to the railroad there, and we waited and saw more buzzards than you can imagine. And they didn't come. But we went to Sunday school the next morning, as usual, in the Presbyterian church there. And in the middle of the Sunday school class, we heard a noise of an airplane motor, which was new to us. And this plane was coming over this Academy Hill at a fair, not real low, but low enough that you could see a man sitting up close to the engine, its front. He went on to the West Coast, and he got killed out there in California. It didn't have a wheel on the back end, under the rudder. It didn't have a wheel. It had a stick, and when they were taking off, that thing was plowing that stick was plowing the dirt, and then the wind would lift the tail, and then they'd take off. And the World War I in San Antonio had Kelly Field, where they were training. And this uncle of mine, who was in the war, World War I, he was one day bombardment squadron somewhere in France. That was his address. He was still in it when the war was over. And his next assignment was to Panama. And he'd been in Panama a year or two, and they were getting ready to build Randolph Field on the east side of San Antonio. And the commandant, the head guy that was gathering, his first order of business was to transfer Major Reuben D. Biggs from Panama to that Randolph Field. He was in the first corps of officers that were running Randolph. And I had a bunch of Boy Scouts, and we stopped and went through. We were going to Bandera, and we stopped at Randolph, and the Texas Gulf Surf Company thought that they had an inside track where somebody, you take care of these scouts and up there. And so, boy, they hopped around. We outran their schedule. I knew a road across the north end of San Antonio that they didn't seem to know about, and we went on that and dodged. We came out just west of Jefferson High School, a new senior high.
105 years. That's great. 105 years of life on this earth. Do you have any? Can you summarize your life, or do you have a secret to longevity? You know, my wife says you're a chemistry teacher, and she thinks you're mixing something up in the back room that's kept you alive for 105 years. What do you think?
I don't have a secret.
Okay, that's fair enough.
I usually get pretty well fed.
You have a daily routine, I understand. I mean, you told me one time you eat breakfast at 7:30 and you eat lunch at 11:30 and you eat dinner at 5:30.
Yeah.
So you just have a regular routine of things?
Yeah, but it gets broken every once in a while, but yes, it's regular. They schedule the events, and whatever they change it to, that's what we do.
Well, let me ask you a question. I've heard, someone told me that you had something to do with radar back in the
Not radar before I went in the Navy, no.
No.
But after I got in, it was repair.
Okay.
Testing and repair. We had to board the blimp and check the gear to see if it was working right. And if it wasn't, get it working right.
What years were you in the Navy?
42, 3, 4, and the first part of 45. I had written Fort Sam Houston to get in the Army. They didn't answer. So I went to Houston, and they had a bunch of offices in the old post office building, and they said, well, what are you interested in? Are you interested in microwave radar? Yeah, that's it. I'll get to learn something about microwave radar. And so they got a letter back from them and said, due to a modern Pleias planus, which is flat foot, due to a modern Pleias planus, and a pterygium on each eye, which will grow if you're in a wind, like a sailor on the deck of a ship out in the ocean. That pterygium would grow and cover over his pupil, and he couldn't see. So they didn't. So they wrote me back and said, due to moderate Pleias planus, a pterygium on each eye, and I don't think you'd think of it unusual. Anyhow, I got a letter answer from them. It says it's true that these are minor defects and that he wouldn't preclude service in the Navy, but we're getting younger men. At that time I was 39, and they said they're getting plenty of younger men, and so I could go back and teach school.
Okay. Brother Biggs, could you tell us a little bit about your marriage? When did you get married?
I got married to Branch's daughter that I met in Pearsall, one of the first places that I went to teach. I was introduced to her there, and I went down to her home, which was about halfway between San Antonio and Corpus Christi. George West is a ranch town, supply town, and her family were about a mile out of George West on their farm. She had 14 brothers and sisters for the same mother. And I had studied in psychology that in a big spread like that, 14, if they're all mentally alert and capable, that they're doing pretty good. But if they had several afflicted children in the 14, that would be one to stay away from.
Well, when did you get married?
When?
When?
Christmas, let's see. School was out, and I went to San Marcos in my car, picked my mother up, drove down to George West, and out in the country to the Coca Ranch. They wanted to teach me to dance. I never had danced, but I couldn't dance, and I couldn't be taught. But
And when did you get married?
in their home, my grandfather, who was a Methodist minister, came up from Brownsville to their home, and he performed the ceremony. And then we took off to San Antonio. My bridal trip to the St. Anthony Hotel in San Antonio.
I know you have one daughter. Do you have any other children?
Yeah, 2 boys. Jimmy turned out to be an electrical. He had a degree in electricity. I think he probably did pretty well for the company he worked for. And Ray, the second boy, graduated at Texas in art. And after he graduated, he went out to hunt a job. And there wasn't any job. They said, do you have your service over? No, you didn't have your service over? Well, you're too likely to have to leave, and so I don't want to spend trouble teaching you and then have you go off and leave. And so he went down and enlisted in the Army. Sent him to New York, and they have a school for the Army secretaries. In the company, you got somebody that's been to that school, and he can do the office work properly. They sure need to do the Navy some of that too. The first thing they did in Houston, I was getting my paper to go to Algiers in New Orleans. Algiers is an old Coast Guard station, and they turned it into a receiving station. And about the third day there, muster said, anybody here can tie an ice blossom? Well, I'd just been teaching Boy Scouts to tie ice blossom, so I very timidly put my hand up. You go up to the 3rd floor, and you issue hammocks, mattresses, clothes, all the things that they're going to issue you. And you work up there. Well, that's okay. That was a good duty. There was a ship in the river in the Mississippi, a pretty good-sized ship that had a very big hole in the front, up in the prow. And that let me know that there was business on hand. I didn't want to be on that ship or any other ship that was going to have a front end shot off.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Biggs, how many grandchildren do you have?
2 great-grands, 2 girls. One of them is a tennis shark. She's about 16, and she's coming over into the adult competition now, and she's been in her age group. She got the first prize in her age group.
How old is your second granddaughter?
Huh?
You have 2 grandchildren.
Yeah.
How old is the second one?
She's about 9 or 10.
Okay. So, right now, how many generations in your family are alive today?
About 5 generations. My great-grandfather, Amarai A. Biggs, was a Methodist minister in Arkansas. And a Mason. and one of his descendants through another person, not to me.
So 5 generations were Masons, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Brother Biggs, we have an interesting presidential race going on as we're recording this. We have our first-time black man and first-time woman running for an opportunity to be president. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's purely my belief that either one of them could handle it. But Obama is going to have more than troubles, more problems than Ms. Hillary.
Why do you say that? You say Obama's going to be...
Well, she's been in the Senate longer than he has. And they really knock down, drag out sometimes in the Senate. I hope that they can do it without tearing things up.